I'm a fourth generation member of this church. My grandfather and his mom were both founding members here 75 years ago. My grandparents were both active members until they passed away. My dad has been a lifelong member here. He and my mom raised me and my sister in the church, and now me and my wife Emily go to church here. So I've never not been a member here.
I interned with Project Transformation in the summer of 2021, and I came as a house pastor visiting, and then I was a fellow here, came every Sunday, loved it, moved back to Illinois, and became a member in December of 2024.
We started attending church pretty much immediately after we moved to Nashville. I took my first job out of graduate school, and we lived right over there on Wiley Street. And so what happened was Thea wanted to belong to a church, and so she would walk here for choir practice, and then when the service started, I would come, and we've just been coming ever since. And the only members of my family that have been here is the children. So, you know, we're like a family away from home when we come to this church.
I started coming here since 1995. We just happened to, you know, come to this location based on where we bought our house. And my husband was like, well, you know, my dad taught me to go to the nearest church to my house, and nearest Methodist church, I might add. So we came in, peeked through the window, didn't come in, and then we came back the next Sunday, and we've been here ever since. And it's been nice.
My wife Pam was asked to sub on the organ for a Christmas cantata. And so I kind of came along with her and tried to be unseen in the congregation, and she accompanied their Christmas cantata. And it was supposed to be a 6-week commitment. And she loved it, and I loved it. And it was a place where we felt very loved and cared for. And along the way, then she played for the choir, and so then I joined with the choir. And as we continued, then we kind of fell in love with the church, and we stayed. So it's been 15 years in that. I've been profoundly touched as a couple to be here.
It was interesting how I became part of this church, and because I worked at the elementary school across the street, and my mother had met a lady that worked in the cafeteria, and this lady said, oh, she needs to come to Matthews. And my mother said, you need to go to Matthews. And I was like, you all just need to leave me alone. But it was like it was coming at me from so many different places. I always say that God sent me here, that he was like, if you'll just go. And I did. And I've had a new church family ever since.
I started coming to church here in 1962 at the ripe old age of a baby. My grandmother and my father were both charter members of this church. My grandmother was part of the Sunday school class that formed this church from City Road with some help from City Road. They decided that it was a good idea to have a second church for a community that was growing, because when City Road was built, this neighborhood wasn't there. And I want to say about 20 people came to start it. They started over in Amqui and then moved over here shortly thereafter. And I want to say 60 years ago, they built the sanctuary. They started in the fellowship hall, or what we know as the fellowship hall, with the upstairs being Sunday school rooms. And then later this was added.
I had first attended Neely's Bend United Methodist Church starting in 2000, and they closed the last Sunday in September of 2016. So the first time we came over here was the first Sunday in October of 2016. There were 8 of us that came from the church. Currently, there are only 2 of us left.
Well, I was born and raised in this church. Some of my earliest memories are from here. My father was a charter member, and my grandparents were charter members. My mother was the organist for 40 plus years. So we were here basically, as they say, every time the doors were open. My brother and I, we both grew up here. And my dad was a leader, of course, in the church with Sunday school superintendent, Sunday school teacher at times, I believe, and my mother was active in other organizations, women's groups, and as well as with the choir, children's choir, during my growing up years.
I guess my initial memories of attending church was always rushing because we were always late, and then straight to Sunday school. So I was in Miss Loretta's Sunday school class with Dylan and Julie, and we would get little stars for being on time and for remembering to bring our Bible and all the things. And then we would get acknowledged after like a month of bringing your Bible or being on time. Then you'd get a little acknowledgement and a little gift in church from Miss Loretta, and she announced it to everybody. I also learned the Apostles' Creed in church every Sunday. We said it every week. We don't really do that as much anymore, but I can spout it off now if I was asked to.
This church just feels like home to me. It's a wonderful group of people. I feel like even though we're small, we are doing the work of Christ here, and in a number of ways that are a lot, actually, for a church as small as we are. The fellowship we have here is special. You feel comfortable when you're with any group of people, and it's just, as Miss Loretta told me one time, she says when she walks through those doors on Sunday morning, she just feels good. She feels at peace, and she feels the presence of Christ.
We experienced something different at Matthews that we've not experienced anywhere else, and that it was a sense of we felt loved not because of what we brought, as far as, playing the organ or playing the piano or being able to sing and do the choir. We felt loved for who we were. And honestly, as a lifetime church musicians, that was something that was new to us. And that's very compelling. And we felt all the more drawn here by the authenticity of it all.
When I first interned with Project Transformation in 2015, 2015, Luke Lee was an intern with me. So when I was a fellow, Luke became my host church pastor, and I loved getting to be in ministry with him, working with after school, and getting to know the people in this congregation are so wonderful. I think Angel and Mark White have loved on me. They invited me to Easter when I was a fellow. Obviously, Loretta. I love Loretta. She's been really important to me. She always gives me her little hard candies. I don't have grandparents anymore, and so having someone who loves on me and cares about me in that way, it's really special. I think everyone here is great, but it's being in a church that wants to be connected with their community, especially through Project Transformation, which is so important to me. It's really special, and I love it.
I think the biggest for both Pam and I is we came in reserved to know this is short term, and the joy has been, wow, this is long term. And there's been a freedom in saying, okay, I'm not going to withhold hold and be safe, but to say, okay, for as long as God says, I want you here, then we're here.
I came here first and I did not have children. I'd only been married 3 years, and I was here for about a year and a half before Cammie came along. And I mean, this church just hugged me up, at such a tender time in my life. And from then, I mean, it was, the ladies came together, threw a big baby shower for me, and they just took her in like their own. And so, I was pretty much sold then, But over the years, my second child came along, when Krista was here, and she just fell right in there. She was here when Pastor Burke was here. And so they were both had these nice christenings that I really liked, Brother Ron walked Cammie down the aisle and let her meet everyone. And I was thinking, I hope Krista gets that kind of baptism. And Brother Larry did the same thing with Krista, walked her down the aisle and let her visit everyone. So that was really nice. So we've been here for many years. And in the latter years, when my mom was alone, I lost my dad. And my mom came to stay with me for a little while. And so she came in and was sitting in her normal seat, there. And everybody just embraced her with such love. And, one of the members actually saw that she was a little chilly on Sunday, and he brought her a blanket. And, she used that blanket till the day she passed, I missed that spot where she was sitting, but they just embraced her so much, It was so nice to have my mom a part of my church family for, a good while after my dad. So that was really sweet,
My grandmother signed my father up to the role while he was technically in the service. He was 17, I believe, and spent his senior year of high school in the Air Force. When they were taking members, she wanted to make sure he moved with her and added him to the role, at which he came before they actually started a charter membership, but he was obviously in the service, so he was only coming when he was on leave at that time. And he stayed here until his dying day. Church has relatively stayed the same over the years. It started out with a larger congregation that I remember as a child, and has slowly over the years, like a lot of small churches, has gone to a small membership. But I would say the constant from the entire time that I've been here, I would say the constant thread has been God and love. It's always been a kind of a family type feel to it. And after a couple of years before my wife and I started a family, we decided to come back here to benefit from a small church. Those that have been to large churches know you can get lost in a large church pretty easily. You can't hide in a small church. I've spent a number of years on different committees, and I'm sure we'll spend a number of more years on different committees over the years. Because of the history that my family has here, I feel a real sense of rootedness. When I think about this physical space, this is one of the few places that's been a constant throughout my entire life. So when I walk through the doors here, I just feel grounded, and I really value that.
with how crazy the world can be, this is a place that I can come and is truly feels like a sanctuary.
That was 1985. The pastor at the time was Hawkins Clark, and he was a very nice guy, and was just so thrilled when we told him that we did want to be a member. And the thing about our lives since then is, you know, we grew up, we bought a house in Inglewood, and we still came here. And then as the family grew, we bought a house in Goodlettsville, and we still came here. This church is for a small church, does so many things. There's a lot of activity going on. It feels full of life. And I think the people here, you know, we're trying to learn, you know, how to be welcoming to strangers, how to love people that are different than us. And what I see is a congregation where everybody, you know, you can see there's some nervousness sometimes, but they're struggling to do that and just to be a good Christian. I find that very endearing and very comfortable for the way I see worship.
My mother has been a part of this church. She ended up coming after I did, and she joined the church. And then, of course, Ken, my previous husband, he was here before I came. So, and the funny part was that a gentleman by the name of C.H., his sister and he were both here at the time, and Miss Sarah said, when you walked in, she said, I said, there's Ken Hackett's wife. And I said, well, why didn't you tell me? And she said, nope, you all had to figure it out. So that was another blessing to meet him.
There weren't a lot of kids that were my age when I was really little. And so when it came time for me to start Sunday school, there hadn't been a regular Sunday school for really little kids, like preschool age. And so Miss Loretta decided she would start being a Sunday school teacher again, and she would be my Sunday school teacher. And many Sundays it was just the two of us, and Noah's Ark was my favorite story. So she would do Noah's Ark almost every Sunday just for me. And that's one memory that I have that's special. And she, every time a new person comes to this church, she tells them that she was my Sunday school teacher and we did Noah's Ark every week.
There have been a lot of ministries that the church has been involved in, a lot of community events that the church has been involved in, and seeing, I have been here where we have maybe 5 people in the church and we're just fighting to still be here, and I've been here when we have a solid like 60 people in the church and we are happy to see them all and everybody is busy doing all these different things.
I've seen things that probably we shouldn't have done due to our size, but with some prayer and with taking a leap of faith, we were able to go ahead and be successful in a lot of programs that we really weren't sure if we were large enough to be able to take. I know for a number of years we had a daycare that was on the first floor. Now we, of course, work with Project Transformation. But I actually worked with several families as I got older that benefited from us having a daycare. The daycare was for the neighborhood that had people that couldn't quite afford what all the other daycares were charging at the time. And it was very successful for a number of years.
Pastoral leadership-wise, I think every pastor has brought something different at what the kind of that, Esther, you're here for such a time as this. I have felt like each pastor has brought something that we've needed, and you can either choose to grow from that or you can choose to say, no. And I feel like Pam and I have kind of put our hearts of saying, okay, what can we learn or what are we learning? in the process. So we've been hungry to learn and, sense that each pastor that has come, they lead differently, they have different personalities, and in the midst of all that, there's a sense of, I want to learn from God through you. And so there's been a willing and a joyful submission to what God has brought through each of the leaders and the clergy. So every Sunday is formational if you let it.
Malcolm Patton was here for many years, 7 or 8 years during my teenage years. So that was a kind of crucial part of my life. I think he had a good major impact on a lot of us as teenagers.
My mom and my dad have been in active leadership roles for a lot of my life, and before that, my grandfather and grandmother were in active leadership roles. And I have a memory of a story that my grandmother told maybe more than once about a time where things got maybe a little tense or heated in an administrative board meeting, and somebody said something about there being maybe a few two members of our family on the board, to which my grandmother responded and said, well, just because we're related doesn't mean we agree on everything. And that has kind of stuck with me, not just because it's, it's an example of the fiery wit that she had, but also because I think it's true not just of my family, but of the greater church family. We're a group of people with varying perspectives and opinions, and no, we don't always agree on everything, but we're working together with a common goal. And our love for God and our love for each other holds us together, and we're able to work through our differences and be stronger because of them. And I think that is a real testament to God at work through the community of this place.
The pastor that was here when I came, really, he shaped me as far as mission work. He and his wife were previous missionaries. And one of the things that I'm really involved in now is the UMCOR, which is United Methodist Committee on Relief. And he's the one that introduced me to it. And I remember when he first talked about it, I was like, had not heard about it. And he said, no, most people had not. So he was the person that actually ended up introducing me to someone from Gallatin United Methodist that was actually taking teams to Louisiana. And so that really started it. And now we have people that are going and we're taking teams, and it's just exciting because missions is where my heart is.
When I think back to, say, the 40 years that I've been here and the people that I've known, I think that just some of them that kind of sat out here in the congregation were instrumental in sort of informing me, what a good Christian life looks like. And when I think back, I do think about Bobby Johnson. Bobby Johnson really ran this church like it was his own. But he taught me a lot in terms of, getting out of my chair and doing something, or if I think something needs to be said, go ahead and say it. And getting the whole church together on undertaking a project and getting it done. So I really do think about Bobby Johnson still and his influence. I also think about Ken Hackett. Ken Hackett, when I first met him, was one of the loud guys in the back of the bus as we commuted from downtown. But then he started coming to our church, and he was like an inspiration to me. Like he had the sense of this is what Jesus is like, and I can go ahead and be a faithful person and contribute to the community. And I think of Ken Hackett in terms of somebody that was like that and for me. The ministers that I remember, like John Vaughn, helped grow the church. We were on a baseball team. I don't remember I think I was on a baseball team with Marion Williams, another one of the saints of the church. And when Pastor Vaughn came, he joined the team. He was very much a sports fanatic. And he was all gung-ho and making sure we won our games and stuff like that. But I certainly remember him for that. And I remember Pastor Steve Van Hooser. He's one of those that he would be just like us out there in the real world, but then he'd be so remorseful and praying to God that he wasn't his best self when he was out there in the everyday world. And really when he was, very much a person to be admired and one that I respect greatly. It just reminds us all that, we all come here being human and wanting to be Christ-like, and it's a work in progress for all of us.
Well, I'll start with pastors that have shaped my life. The first one is, Patrick Woolsey. I was in his wedding. My sister and I were both his flower girls. And we did a lot of things with him. We played video games. We did a lot of things. He really spent time nurturing us as small children. And then Pastor Steve, he started here when I was 12, and he did my confirmation class, and through high school, he was my pastor. So, everybody knows those are important times of childhood. And yeah, so he was there doing a lot of things with us as a youth group and going out and doing walks. And because I live close to the church, then any pastor really is impactful when they're living in the parsonage and they're essentially my neighbor. And I could be riding my bike around the neighborhood and say, I'm going to go stop by and see the pastor today. So I did a lot of interacting with the pastors in the parsonage while I was growing up and just being a child outside of my house.
All of them have in some way affected my spirituality. I would say Luke Lee and Pastor Cheryl have made the biggest impact.
Of course, the Methodist Church, you always have a regular change of pastors. We've had two pastors that have been here longer than, a 7-year stint. One pastor being the pastor while I was in late elementary school and up to high school. We had him, I believe it was 8 years. And then later on we had another pastor for 8 years that ironically was here during the same time frame for my children. And Pastor Steve was here when my children were younger age, all up through high school. Countless other pastors that I remember fondly. I said this morning John Vaughn was going to be speaking at homecoming. I remember John from when we came back. My wife and I went to First Baptist Church for a couple of years when we first got married. And then when we started coming back here regularly, John was the pastor here.
The pastors here have been so wonderful, and they've brought out things in me that I didn't know I had. I will say, when Pastor Woosley was here, he had the girls in his wedding, and I live very close to the church. So, and with the pastor being right there, they just took my girls like their own. They'd come and visit regularly. We'd call and say we firing up the grill, and he and his wife would show up, and so that was really nice. And I think I would say that's the first really, where I got to really know a pastor that close. And that made me see it a little differently, the view a little differently. But the other pastors that I've had a nice relationship with, I will say it's Brother Hong. He brought out things in me that he had this really nice way of telling you what you can do, and you don't even know you can do it, you know. We did a passion play, an Easter play, when he was here, and he just told us we were going to do it, you know. Angel and I were writers and directors and costume and characters we had to put in and change different things, and we literally put on a passion play and had it on film. I'm like, who knew we had that in us, you know? So that's kind of nice. When Mr. Burke left, when Pastor Burke left, he had just started the half notes where he put the children together and he had them, you know, hitting the rhythm sticks and everything. And it was really nice. He started that and he had them practicing and everything. And at that time, Krista was 2 and Cammie was 5. And there were several other children that were all a part of the half notes. And when he left, he handed me the sticks. I'm like, I don't know how to do this. He says, I'm sure you'll do fine, you know. And there I am. Now I'm a choir director, you know, for the half notes. And they sang for years until they grew into the whole notes, you know. So they've had ways of pulling out of us what we don't know we really have, which I think is a beautiful thing. You know, it's a real beautiful thing. Pastor Steve, he also had a strong impact on my life because he pulled my children together and he did their confirmation class and he shaped and molded them as teenagers, and that was something that I always worried about. You know, how will they be impacted as teenagers? You know, because teenagers can sometimes, you know, go in their own directions, and he had a way with them. You know, a very special way with them, and he was here all through their teenage years, right up to the last. Well, he did Krista's last. He did her confirmation right before he left, literally weeks before he left, and you know, it helped shape who they are and how they see other people. And it's just, again, no words can explain what this church has meant to me over the years.
A lot of things in service are the same. We recently have new children, so we have children lighting the candles in the morning, but I mean, I was doing that with Dylan's instruction a lot. And we would light the candles and go back out with them at the end of the service. When I joined the choir, I would actually have to leave the choir to go and light the candles and come back. We also would go down for children's church. There were a lot of us children all around the same age, so we all went down to children's church together. And we would learn, usually it was my mom running that because, you know, she just handled us all. She just wrangled us together. And she would run our whatever little thing we were doing down there as kids, and we would come back up and join for the last song with everybody else. But a lot of things were the same. I think mostly it was because there were a lot more children, we had a lot more children's things going on. But the order of service and the important Sundays and important services that we take part in have all been the same.
A lot has changed, but a lot has stayed the same also. When I think about the Sunday morning, a lot is pretty similar to how it was when I was growing up. We are Methodists, so we don't change a lot about the liturgy and things like that. I remember one particular Sunday when I was little, they called all of the children up to come up for a children's message from the pastor. We all sat at the front of the church, and for some reason I was a shy kid. Something possessed me when the children's message was over to not go back to my pew in the normal way. I decided to crawl under all of the pews back to my parents. I can remember looking up at the noses of some ladies that were looking down at me in kind of shock, and of course my grandmother and mother were mortified. But Pastor Cheryl just recently started doing a children's message again.
Typical Sunday in my younger years was not far from what they are now, except for about a 7 or 8 year period, myself and Frankie Loudon were acolytes. The acolytes have it a little easier now in that they go back and sit wherever they want to, but Frankie and I had to sit on the front row every Sunday, which probably kept us out of a lot of trouble during church. But we had growing up, I remember a kind of a core group, if you will, of my parents' friends that were friends from here. They did a lot of things. They did a lot of things that were church, and they did a lot of things that were not church affiliate. They went on church retreats, and they went on vacations with other families that were here. I can remember spending I think it was the 1972 Sugar Bowl, watching it at the Johnson's house while Mom and Dad's Sunday school group had a New Year's Eve party. Of course, the Johnsons, they had 2 children that were here, which ended up forming our young adults, which we, for a number of years, had 2 groups. We had a young adults and I guess for lack of better terms, a younger young adults, which was basically high school to what's now middle school and the younger group was, I would say, late elementary school to, as it turned out, high school for most of us that went through during those years. Used to go to church camp regularly, which was back then at Beersheba, which we still have done some retreats there, but it was originally a United Methodist campsite for church camps, and it also was a place that housed Mountaintop, which is not a Methodist organization, but it worked hand in hand with the Methodist organization for years. And we would combine a lot with Connell because they had a bus, and we would go to church camp when they went.
There were more people here when we first came. Of course, a lot of them are elderly and just have passed on, and some of them have just gone to different churches. So we don't have as big of a congregation as we did.
The church has changed quite a bit over the years. When I was growing up, there were a lot of children. There were more members at that time. We were pretty active as with the children and the youth and adult groups as well. That now has changed to where we're just kind of singular. We act as one. We still do active things, but yet we don't have the separate groups that we did during those years, many years ago.
When we started coming, there was Sunday school and a nursery and programs for little kids. One of the practices of the church was to have a children's service, a sermon right here up at the altar, and then at the end of the children's sermon, they would go downstairs for an age-appropriate program, whereas we would have the sermon and other boring things. We don't do that anymore, and I think the first few times when we couldn't have service downstairs for the kids, our kids just sat in the pew and pouted, and complained like we're missing something, and that's kind of like tears me up.
The comparison between then and now Sundays, they're very similar. However, one major difference is I do have my children with me now. When I first came, I was here about 1.5 years with no children, but where I sit says a lot about the changes that were made. I wasn't in the choir when I first came here. And for several years, when the girls were smaller, I wasn't in the choir. And I didn't join the choir. I've only been in the choir maybe 12 years, maybe. And so that changed my view of things, you know. I would join the choir for the cantatas at Easter and Christmas, but I was never a regular part of the choir. And you know, that changed a lot in my perspective of the church, you know. So, you know, everybody has kind of a spot where they sit. And so that spot where I sit back there changed because now I'm up here in the choir stand, you know. But as far as the typical kind of church dynamic, the service dynamic, it's very similar. There's been a few things that changed over the years, but just very similar, and that's a nice consistency, a very, very nice consistency, you know. Wherever you go, if you visit another Methodist service, you know, it's nice to have that little similar consistency in how you worship.
When I think about what it was like previously, the church has changed. And the music is what really comes to mind first. Of course, I'm a member of the choir, but having Jonathan as our worship leader has made a huge difference. Not just with the music itself, but he's a true worship leader. And so spiritually, I mean, we've had people come in and say, oh my goodness, you know, it sounds like there's a ton more people than just the few people that we have that's in the choir. So, and that always speaks to me as well. So we had choir before, but it wasn't anything like what we have now.
I find it very humbling to be able to help serve communion. That was something I did at Neely's Bend, and I was afraid I was never going to get to do it again. And then I think it's a very holy experience. And so I'm very humbled to be able to do that. I'm head of the church council right now. I've worked with Room at the Inn, and I help out with Project Transformation when I can.
Obviously, I was a house pastor with PT, but I spent a full year here as an after-school fellow, really loving this Amqui neighborhood and the school. So being involved with Project Transformation is really at the core of what I love doing. Also love helping out with Room in the Inn. I think my experience with PT has helped shape how I serve and how I'm involved in my community. So serving a meal and sitting with people and hearing their stories is something that I love doing. And then I also really love Amqui's Angels in the winter time. I love just choosing a family, buying something, and hoping to kind of spread the holiday spirit. It's really fun, and it's something I look forward to every year.
I have to mention first the Amqui Angel Ministry. They just come through. Whenever I make the announcement, before I leave church that day, I've almost given out all the children. And the nice part about it is they just go either do the shopping or they provide the funds to do the shopping. And they're not necessarily there. They're not looking for any kind of praise for, you know, what they're doing. They just know that this is for the community. This is going to help other people. And I get to be on the, you know, Merry Christmas, here's your, I get to be on that end, and they allow me to do that. That it's just a beautiful thing. And just knowing that when visitors come in, and I don't know how other churches work, but when visitors come in, this church is just like a big hug to new people coming in, you know, visitors. They just embrace them. And if I can see them show up for their community like that, I mean, what else is there? I mean, they have such giving hearts. You know God is working through them. And that says a lot to me. It says a lot to me. I remember Miss Loretta would tell me when we were in the women's group, we had this, one of the ministries that we did was we would make food and we would take it to one of the, I think it was over either Vandy, or we would take it to their Wesley Fellowship and we would feed them one of their meetings. And I still have this little red truck, and I would go and I'd pick up Miss Loretta and we'd load up food in the truck and we would drive it over there. And she still reminds me of how that blessed her, you know. And we were feeding teenagers in college, you know. That's just who they are. It's just who this church is, and I'm blessed by that.
The Room in the Inn, men that come that need those services, that's been an important ministry of our church. I think the work with it, we have a strong presence with Christian Cooperative Ministry in the Madison area, serving the people of Madison for food and clothing and that sort of thing is a powerful ministry as well. At Christmas time, the Amqui Angels is a fun thing to do where you're helping children that might otherwise not have a good Christmas.
I'm first of all, I've been a treasurer for a long time. I took over from Roger Stewart like so long ago, and eventually I got tired of being the treasurer, and I told the nominations committee, you know, I've done this for a long time. It's time for somebody else. It takes probably 2 years to transition. Let's have a new treasurer. And they made Bob Johnson the treasurer, who was a former treasurer. He's older than me. It's not like the future of the church. And I said, sure enough, I'm going to be treasurer again in a few years. And it got to be the point where Bob could hardly write the checks anymore, and I became treasurer again. I'm happy to say that I think that the work I do as treasurer has helped the church a lot in terms of trying to get everybody to be faithful stewards of finances. I'm always grateful. Every time I've asked the church, say, hey, I need help, they've always responded. And many of them just respond in ways that inspire me.
When I was in high school, we had a pretty good group of young people at the time. There were probably about a dozen of us. And I happened to be the oldest one. And so the pastor at the time volunteered me to be the leader of the youth group, which was a position that I was hesitant to take up at first, but I ended up doing it for about 10 years. And just a lot of good memories from that time. It was a really good group of kids. Some of them I'm still good friends with to this day. So I was glad that the people at the time saw that I could be a leader and called me to rise up and do that. And so I was the youth leader for a while, and then I also was served as the lay leader for a few years after college.
I work at CCM. That's our Christian Cooperative Ministry. We give unhoused people sack lunch every day, 2 pieces of clothing, and we give out food boxes to the community all over Davidson County. They can come in once a month, and the food is given according to the size of the family, and then they can get clothing too. So it's a very important mission to me.
I've done lots of activities, lots of events with the church. I have been to UMCOR in Louisiana 3 times. It's always a fun trip, always good memories from that. I've participated in events with Amqui. I was a student at Amqui for a time. I have done the Music City Kids Marathon with Amqui kids, where we have gone and run with them, and I ran a mile with kindergartners, and an hour later I'm running a mile with 3rd graders. So I've done a lot of community engagement with the church. I participate in Room in the Inn a lot. My dad tends to run that right now, so I do a lot of helping plan the breakfast, helping plan what everybody's doing, showing up and making beds. I do a lot of that. I'm in the choir, so I'm doing that every week.
Again, I love PT. And so there isn't anything that warms my heart more than walking into a sanctuary that's so quiet during, at 12 o'clock on a Sunday. But then during the week, from the hours of 9 to 3, it's filled with kids running around, screaming and playing games and reading with volunteers. I love this space being filled with children. And I think that as we continue to go on, hopefully we continue our ministry with PT, because it's such a valuable asset and we can be such a great resource to our community. And so I think God is working through our children, and inviting them into this space is just such an incredible thing.
Currently, I was asked to be a trustee, and Jim has agreed. We are, for the past little over a year, have done that position. It's been a little challenging, but we're trying to kind of find our way through that. We have both been involved in Room in the Inn. I currently volunteer at the Christian Cooperative Ministry, and I'm part of the women's group. And I've gone on 2 Corps mission trips, which have been very satisfying, rewarding.
God has made me connect with people on a deeper level, no matter what part of society they are. It doesn't matter. He's helped me to treat everyone as one of his children. And that's another thing at CCM. I try to make sure when the unhoused come in every day that I learn their name, and I call them by their name, because they're people, just like everybody else. And not everybody treats people like that.
I served as the lay leader for a year, maybe 2. I'm currently vice chair of the board. I forget that sometimes, but I am. So I take minutes and a lot of meetings going on. That's mainly the leadership positions that I've had. I've also been in I guess you would call it the children's choir. And while my mom was the leader of that, there were really just 3 of us at the children's choir. Me, Krista, Julie. So, and we were once a month leading just like the choir does. We were our youth choir, and we were leading a worship song of some sort during the service once a month. So I did that. I guess that was my intro to leadership as a child.
But I have served as a member of our women's group for years. They started a night circle, and I came on. They've always had a women's group, but it met in the daytime, and I worked during the day, so I would never take part. And in order to let us take part, those of us who work, they started an evening circle. And I started being active in the women's group, and I led the evening circle for a while, and then I came on as president of the group, and I've been treasurer, and I found things in myself, that I didn't know, how to work with people and so forth. And that was a nice experience. My children went to Amqui, which is right across the street, and I got to know, being in PTA there, I got to know the guidance counselor. And in discussion, we decided to do, we later named it Amqui Angels, but we just decided to have a relationship with the school in such a way that we can help some of the families, So we started adopting children from the school for Christmas, for the families who maybe needed some extra help. And over the years, it has grown into what we call Amqui Angels. And every year, I get, even if I say, well, we may not have it this year, I may not have anybody interested. Every year, are we going to do that? I want a child. I want to adopt a child. So I just say, okay, we're going to do it again, So every year I talk with the guidance counselor, and we get a list of names of families in need, and this church steps up every time. We get a certain list. It could be anywhere from 15, 20, 25 kids. And sometimes when I think I'm not going to be able to get them all adopted, I never have to take any back. So this church steps up every time and fill in for the community. They've always been real good about that with the community. And with me being part of this community, my children went to Amqui. I live right across the street. I go to church right across the street. This is my community. And I have to say, this church is really involved in that. And that was one of the things about here that I really liked for my children. So as far as leadership, I think I've been, here and there, I did do the youth for a little while, the children. Like we'd go downstairs for King's Kids and I'd do the children's message for the small ones during service. And I did that for a long time and managed the list, the rotation for those who were doing that. So there's been different things that I've been active in over the years, in and out.
I also remember going on retreats to Beersheba Springs when I was little. Those were really good memories, as well as some going on several trips to Louisiana on a Corps mission trip. And all of those, the things that stick out in my mind when I think about things like that are always the people, and I feel a lot of gratitude for the people of this place.
When I've taken people to Corps to do these, and when they come back and they start talking about it and what it meant to them and how they just, they definitely would go back again and they wanted to help any way they could. I mean, that's God touching all these people. It's not anything, of course, that I've done, but just I think I always say he puts the team together that's supposed to be there at that time. And it's just amazing to sit and watch it. And then with the choir that we have now, when Jonathan came in, and we were kind of in a bad place, to be honest. And it was we needed something fresh. We needed some anointing, and just how he worked with us when he came in, and how he developed all that has been just phenomenal. And to watch how God's just moved through there. But yeah, I mean, we've had people that have come to the door that have said, the Lord just told me to come in here for whatever reason. And I'll never forget, there was one lady that came in one Sunday, and for some reason, I was in the sanctuary, and she came through the front door, and she said, I'm supposed to be here. And Dylan came up the back steps, and I said to her, would you like a cup of coffee? And she said, yes, but you don't understand. She said, it's like she didn't want anybody to visit her. She didn't, I said, you're good. You're in a good place. And so I sent Dylan to get her a cup of coffee, and she sat and she stayed with us until she wasn't here anymore. So, but she insisted that the Lord told her to come here.
Our biggest joy has been the choir, because I felt like we've connected and it's been a place of authenticity. So the joy in giving is also, as a choir director, being just as real as the choir members are with me in not hiding or trying to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but to recognize we're family. And honestly, I'm not sure I can move forward without that family that we've become, because I've learned so much from God, from them, and I pray it's been a mutual place of learning in that. So the joy in the serving has been with the choir. It's been a privilege to be allowed to share and to speak and to exhort from the pulpit.
A major transition of seeing the Spirit's movement through the church has definitely been in our choir, and I don't know, Jonathan Dow does a great job. And we have grown, and that form of worship leadership has really helped, I think, everybody, not just the people participating in the choir, but everybody is willing to take that moment of silence or just to reflect on their week or anything going on in their lives. Just from having leadership that's willing to do that helps everyone else do that and be more mindful of that. So that has been a major guiding force, I guess, for our church to be more mindful of why we're here and what we're doing and how we're going to impact our community, and just having the right mindset and not just being like, I'm coming to church and I'm just going to listen to what's going on and then I'm going to leave. Or I'm tired of coming to church because I have all this and this and this and this to do. But to understand your reason and why you're actually here is, I think we do a lot better at noticing that and recognizing that now.
As we stayed, I was invited to lead the choir and to assist with Pam accompanying the worship at services. So when we came, there was this sense of doing, like Pam plays the organ and I play the piano and I lead the choir. As the time went on, it became family. And that choir rehearsal was really our Sunday school. And the formational experiences at Matthews, for me, have come in times of worship and in sharing with the choir. And so that choir has been a formational thing because, everybody in the choir has walked through some hard stuff and life-changing, like upheaval, rock your world kind of things. And the choir has been that safe place, kind of that refuge of, I feel great and we'll worship. And I feel horrible and we'll worship. My heart's broken and we'll worship. And so there was this sense of, I am with you in the good and the bad and the hard and the tears. We'll sing in the tears of joy. We'll sing in the tears of brokenness. And so we have encountered God in those rehearsals, and even as we've ministered and fresh understandings of the character and the nature of God have come even as we're singing, and it's been transformational.
The first time I didn't really meet Jonathan. He came in and I was sitting in my normal seat back there because remember I wasn't in the choir. And he came in and he took a seat because Pam was an interim organist for us. And so he came in and he took a seat and I didn't really know who he was at the time. And I think the half notes had to sing or something. And so they came up like they normally do and sang one of their VBS songs, and and later on when I realized, who he was, I'm thinking, and I remember he asked me if I had any history or any background. I'm like, no, this is just me. This church has a way of bringing out in you what you don't know you can do. But when he came on is when I came in as a choir member. It's my first time up here, and one of the songs that we sang our first meeting is I Need You to Survive. And it hit so home for me in that it was one of the songs that we sang at my home church. And I have found that a lot in my service as a choir member, that he has brought a lot of home back to me. Home as in where I was raised, and that has meant a lot to me. And when we sing, he always reminds us to sing to, smile and, sing as if you're giving a word. And I have to remind myself of that sometime. And when my mom was here with us for a little while, I'd always bring her early when we were practicing. And, she just loved music. And she'd sit in her seat back there, and every now and then Jonathan would say, we'll sing to Granny, So, and so he made it real. He makes it personal, And the music is just phenomenal. I don't know, they've been playing together for so long, but they just make such beautiful sound together, and just like harmony, harmony that fits together. And we were used to be bigger in number, but it really doesn't matter, It doesn't matter what the number is, He just makes it work, and He pulls out of us also, what we didn't think we would do. But beautiful, beautiful souls, both of them.
I think the first choir rehearsal that we had, I gathered the choir around the piano because I didn't know. I knew them from doing a Christmas cantata, but you don't really get to connect fully with people because you're like rehearsed. So we gathered around the piano for that first night, and I invited them to come close. And we learned a song that says, I need you, you need me. We're all a part of God's family. And I'll pray for you, you pray for me. And so they were connecting with one another, and I saw some tears, and I thought, well, I'm not sure what God is doing in that. And then I said to them, the next line in the song is, I won't harm you with words from my mouth. And it was like something broke in that rehearsal, that they were crying and I was crying, and it was this sense of, I commit to you that I will not harm you with words from my mouth. And I think in those moments then there was a sense of, okay, I pray that they felt like, okay, I can entrust myself to you as my choir director, that I will trust you, and that we're going to grow musically, we're going to grow spiritually, and that this is way bigger than performing an anthem on a Sunday. And so I've seen God manifest faithfulness all the way through in 15 years of ministering, having the privilege of ministering with the choir, of seeing that commitment filled of, we're not going to harm one another with words from our mouth, but we're going to speak words of love and grace and that sense of family through the good stuff and the hard stuff and the joys and the heartbreak, that God's been so present in the willingness to be committed to one another in love. And so even today, in singing songs that are new and singing songs that we've sung before, but because we know God a little differently than we knew God the first time we sang it, there's a sense of authenticity and a sense of the God who was is the God who is the God who will be. And there's a safety and refuge in that of, we can rest in the assurance of God's faithfulness in the past and in the present. And there's a sense of peace of, okay, the God who was is the God who is the God who will be. And in that, we can find peace and rest, grace, and joy.
I continue to come to the church because it's like family, it's like home. Since I've moved out of my parents' house recently, it literally is coming home to come to church, and I see all these lovely people every week, and I don't get to see them any other time. And it's a safe place, which is what church should be. It's a safe place, and I'm always happy to see new people and have them experience the same safe place that I've grown up in my whole life. And I am excited to see people who've been here all the time that have made that what it is for me.
I would say honestly, the first thing would be that it was my church growing up. A lot of the same people are still going here. And it's just always been what I said in the beginning. There was always a feeling of God and a feeling of warmth and love from all those that attended here. A lot of people, well, as a church family, I had a lot of fathers and mothers growing up. And as they had children, and I had a lot of friends that I'm friends with today. A lot of them have moved to other states, and life takes you to other areas, and you can't always. I guess I'm rare in that I didn't move more than 15 minutes away.
The people of this place are also something that really makes me feel connected here and keeps me feeling connected. I have people that are like siblings and people that are like second parents and grandparents. And when we baptize an infant in the United Methodist Church, one of the things that's part of the baptismal liturgy is the congregation vows to help raise the child. Maybe not in those exact words, but that's the gist of it. And I really feel like throughout my life there have been people that have followed through on that commitment. And so the people of this place have formed me and really are a big part of who I am today.
The church family that I have here is special. And we've just been through so much stuff together that, you know, when it's good, and during bad times, they're right there to help you.
I think when we first came, of course, we were getting to know everybody, and in our minds, it was a short-term commitment. Like, we're coming here for 6 weeks, we'll do the Christmas cantata, and then we'll be done. And so it felt different because it's like, we're not going to fully invest, you know, we'll come and do what we were asked to do. But as we stayed and as we felt loved for who we were and are, we were drawn by the love and the authenticity. In the worship, there wasn't pretense and high church, inaccessible thing. It was real for us. And that kind of gave freedom to be real along with everybody else. And I think, you know, as the years have gone by, we have appreciated that if you're sad, it's okay. And you can come to church and cry and be yourself. And if you're happy, great. We rejoice with you in that too. But for us, we walked through a lot of things. We were hurting when we came, and, you know, the body as a whole had losses along the way, and there was this freedom to cry or to rejoice and to pray, and there wasn't pressure to be something we weren't. And so I think that there's not been a lot of change, just in the sense of it's become all the more a safe place to be real and authentic.
So when you serve as a fellow with PT, you go to the church that you work in. And I felt specifically during my fellow year that I was just welcomed with open arms here. There wasn't a single time that I was here searching for family. Like, I was a young adult living in a state that wasn't where I'm originally from. And while we're a smaller congregation, I felt loved on by everyone. There was a specific moment when I was a fellow. It was Easter. It was like Easter Sunday, and I was like talking to Angel White, and I'm like, I'm not going home. Like, I don't have anyone. And she was like, just come to our house. And suddenly, like, I found myself at the grocery store buying things, driving out to their house, and spending an incredible time. Like, I had Easter with you and Dylan and Julie and Mark and Angel, and it was just like, oh, there are people here that care about me and love me and, like, bring me into their families. So it was really hard when I moved back to Illinois, kind of leaving these people that have become my family. And I knew that when I moved back, like, there wasn't a single place I wanted to be. while Matthews is smaller and we have work to do still, this was the place I knew I belonged. It's the place where I felt deeply connected. And so I think it's the people that make it what it is. And it's exciting to see where we're going.
I guess everyone at some point would, if you think about, well, am I where I'm supposed to be? Or should I be attending somewhere else? Or, and of course that hasn't gone across my mind before in my history of being here. And I was literally just putting myself in check, This church is like a family to me. They have been there through hard times. They've been there through sad times, through my children's lives, and how they've taken them in as their own. It's just been one of those things where you can't imagine yourself somewhere else, So you're always lifting them up in prayer, the church, the community. I'm a big jogger, and I like to do my little devotions, while I'm out jogging, and that's one of the things that I pray about, and it's when I'm out jogging, and I run right by this church every time, and I think about it, and I say, this church is here, right in the middle of the community. Where else do I need to go? I can walk to church, I can ride my bike to church, and even when service is not happening, the church is still here, Bring the girls up, and we ride our bikes over to the church, and sometimes I'd let them play in the playground, after hours, and we'd stop by and talk to the pastor sometimes during the week, It's good, and here's one of the things that gave me a lot of comfort. I talked to the girls when they were smaller, and I would always say, I'd ask them something like, if you were in trouble here in this house, I need you to know who your neighbors are. So, you'd be comfortable leaving, if you had to leave and go to someone else's home. And without a doubt, they would say, well, I know Miss Pat Hankins, from church lives up the street, and the pastor lives right there. Brother Hong is there, and Pastor Steve is there, and, so that's what I needed to hear. That's the kind of comfort you need. You need your children to know where they're going to go if they need something, and that's what this community has been. There's other members who live near, and they know where they are, They know who's on May Street, who's on Sarver, It's one of those things that it's home. It's home. It's family. That's right where we need to be.
The people. The people, the worship, the whole congregation, the choir, everything. But it's a family atmosphere.
I think what keeps us here is that this is a safe place, and there's a refuge of learning that Matthews has been, and that I don't feel any pressure like you should be further along in your faith journey now, and you ought to try harder. There's a sense of grace here that's, for us, winsome, of not putting on airs and performing and trying to come across like something you're not. So I think what draws us here and keeps us here in this season is that sense of it's okay to be where you are. The invitation is to come and know Christ better. The invitation is to receive grace, to be like Jesus at your place of work and wherever you go, and to love. But there's not like this, you have to live up to this standard. Here, I think what draws us and keeps us is a sense of grace, and a sense of growing, and a sense of we're all learning, and we all screw up, and we're all wanting to grow. And we all grow at different places, and some things come easy, and some things I'm like, I'm not there yet. And yet there's grace for that. And that's changed our lives.